Welcome everybody. Welcome to this great event co-organized by ISACA and the CIO Association of Canada. My name is Alex Buehler. I'm the president for the Vancouver chapter for the CIO Association of Canada. I'm also the CIO of Mountain Equipment Co-op. So welcome here. Our topic today is cybersecurity. Whose job is it anyway? I think it's pretty clear whose job is that, but we'll have a panel to tell us all about that. Of course, security is always a hot topic. When we have some security topics for our association, we have a large turnout. Looking at the turnout here, that's pretty clear. It's a hot topic. The event for tomorrow is sold out. That pretty much explains that our community takes security very seriously. This event is the kickstart for 2016 BC Aware campaign. So the organizing this campaign has taken a lot of work, a lot of effort by our co-chair Justin. And of course, it's also possible, thank you for our sponsors, with TELUS being the title sponsor, Cisco being the title sponsor, and Cisco, our platinum sponsor. Cisco is our title sponsor, and TELUS is our platinum sponsor, and then we have 6 co-sponsors. There you go, got it right this time. So please help me thank them for the sponsorship. So. Now, of course, this couldn't be possible without our organizing committee. So Justin is our chair for BC Aware Organizing Committee. So Justin Malczewski, he's the vice president for ISACA Vancouver chapter, and as I mentioned, is chair for this event. His day job, as he calls it, is he's the account manager for Cisco systems. So he's defined with all British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So I guess you fly to Winnipeg a lot.
I do.
That's a lot of fun. 35 below, and that's when it's warm. we have a chapter, true story, we have a chapter in Manitoba, and I was telling this guy, oh, you must minus 45, and I was minus 37, and he's like, yeah, it's getting better. I don't know. So Justin will introduce our panel, which are standing there, and a moderator also from ISACA. Our moderator, Frank, he's coming from Philadelphia, so he's telling me he had to walk to the airport with 2 feet of snow to get his flight. So.
Pretty close.
So please help me thank Justin to make sure this event, like I say, it's a lot of work and 20 hours for 4 months on his free time. So please, thank you, Justin.
Thank you for that introduction, Alex, and welcome everybody to the first of 15 BC Aware campaign events. So there are 15 events over the next 2-week period. This is the kickoff event. We couldn't think of a better way to kick this off than to do it with the CIOs. I mean, this room and this group of people has a tremendously important role to play in educating the folks that work for us and bringing young people into the profession. We really appreciate this alignment between ISACA Vancouver and the CIO Association of Canada, and we hope to see it thrive and blossom in the years to come. So a little bit of history. This year is this year is the first time we've had a full day event. So tomorrow we have 17 world-class keynote presentations here at TELUS Garden. And it's soup to nuts, a really wide variety of subjects, and so that's pretty phenomenal. But this is 15 different events, and so please do encourage your teams to go to the BC Aware website, sign up for the different events. It's taking place obviously over this 2-week period. And as Alex said, we actually had to cap the registration for tomorrow's event, so that gives you a sort of sense of how popular it has become. So when did this start? 2 years ago, we started with BC Privacy and Security Awareness Day. And, we were really fortunate in that the government, and actually Gary Perkins, the CISO for the province of BC, was gracious enough to let us host a cocktail party, kind of like this, on the evening before the government's conference. And we had a panel discussion, kind of like what we're doing here tonight. In fact, 2 of the panelists on tonight's panel, Erwin Martinez and Jim Attridge, were panelists on that first panel discussion. And thank you so much for your ongoing commitment to this campaign. It's huge. Anyways, here we are 2 years later, and it's a campaign. It's not a day, it's a two-week period. And we're it'd be impossible for me to list all of the different organizations that are involved in the campaign. If you come tomorrow, if you look at, the boards, they're all listed there. But this is not just ISACA. This is a movement, and it belongs to all of us. And this year, I think we're really going to see it, be on the map, and, we're going to see this build momentum going forward. Our local government is represented in a big way here today. We actually have 13 local governments that have proclaimed the next 2 weeks are BC Aware Days. And we're talking Vancouver, Surrey, Victoria, and a whole host of others. We've got the Minister Verk here, and thank you, Minister Verk, for your leadership. So we've got government, industry, and higher education coming together. We've got this huge skill gap that we have to deal with. And so we're really, we're going to take, this opportunity to hammer a stake in the ground and get young people into this profession. And, the net proceeds from the sponsorships that we've raised are going to go towards reaching out to young people and drawing them into the profession. We got a few people to really thank here in terms of our sponsors, TELUS. So, what an awesome place to host this event. Thank you, TELUS, for your leadership, for offering up your space, for offering up your money and your expertise. Let's give TELUS a huge round of applause. We've got Box here, and Joel De La Garza, Box's CISO, came up from the Valley, and he'll be speaking tomorrow. Brian Clendenin, the representative with Box, has been huge for us. He's also a freelance journalist, and he wrote 4 articles to help us to promote this campaign in IT World Canada. So, Brian, that's just a huge contribution. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's worth an applause too. IC Synergy is here, Identity and Access Management Company. They'll be here tomorrow. You'll get a chance to interact with them. Mike Thompson, the president of IC Synergy, when called upon, he just said, "What do you want me to do?" And he just did it. And he actually brought Robert Martin, who's the CISO for Alberta Health Services, who will be speaking here tomorrow as well. We've got Above Security, Jeff Besco, the Senior Vice President of Strategic Advisory Services, is here. Tenable is here. Jack Daniel, who will be speaking here, is actually one of the founders of the B-Sides movement. And for those of you who don't know, B-Sides is it's one of the world's, most, popular and respected security conferences. So really, really honored to have Jack Daniel here today. Ernst & Young steps up in so many different ways. We've got a number of members of the Ernst & Young team on the ISACA board, and, I couldn't possibly list all the ways that they contribute. Langcope and OpenDNS. We have speakers from Langcope and OpenDNS here tomorrow. These are 2 recent acquisitions of Cisco's in the security space. And so, obviously I'm excited to have them here as well. Last but not least, I want to thank my company, Cisco, for taking the leadership role as the title sponsor for the BC Aware campaign. And I'm going to invite Jeff Cargill, our Regional Vice President for Western Canada, to come up here and say a few words. But I can't tell you how, proud I am to work for Cisco, and, the support that I've had as the chairperson of this campaign from my boss, Ahmed Edmond, who's in this room, and Jeff, has been phenomenal. So thank you, gentlemen, for your support. And without further ado, Jeff Cargill.
Justin, thank you. Good evening. So my name is Jeff Cargill. I'm the Regional Vice President for Cisco in Western Canada. I'm in this industry roughly 28 years, but I'm 6 months in Vancouver, so I'm new to the West. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I've met a number of people in the room, but this evening and throughout the campaign, I'll look forward to meeting more of you and speaking with you. Now there's, as Justin said, there are a number of Cisco people here this evening, but I'd like to call out 2. Kagan Adams and Al Amiri. I can see Kagan at the back waving his hand. I can't see Al. Oh, there's Al. Thank you, Al. And respectively, they lead our private sector and our public sector business in Western Canada. So thanks, guys, for being here. So Cisco Canada is very proud to be the title sponsor. I think you just heard Justin say that, so I'll try not to be too repetitive. I think this is the second year that we've participated. And we're here because we take the responsibility to protect our customers very seriously. Security is our #1 priority at Cisco, and we're very happy to be supporting the Aware campaign. And I'll add with TELUS. I know Justin just said that, but I think it's important for us to say who shares security as a top priority in their business and for their customers. Now, how many? 15 separate events, Justin? So I'll, pardon me, plug one that, excuse me, that I'd like to personally invite everyone here to, as well as members of your team, and that's this Thursday, the Cisco Security Day. I think it's at the Walls Center, Thursday, the January 28th, where our security leaders will be here in Vancouver. We're very excited about that, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for you to engage directly with the people that lead and run our lines of business. Now, last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce the Honourable Minister Emmerich Virk, who, along with Premier Clark, just last week made a very exciting announcement at the BC Tech Summit. So Minister Virk oversees our Ministry of Technology, Innovation, and Citizen Services, and has responsibility in the Government of BC Office of the CIO. So last thing I'll say is please enjoy the campaign in the evening. I'd like to welcome the Honourable Minister.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. Prior to coming to government, I spent some 26 years in the RCMP providing security at a different level. So this is a natural segue for me in some way that I am now entrusted with the security of the private information of British Columbians. So on behalf of Premier Clark and all my colleagues, welcome to all those that braved all the elements. I heard about how bad it is in Winnipeg, but for braving the elements and coming here. The conference title, Whose Job Is It Anyhow? I guess if you look around the room, you'd have to put your hand up and say, this is my job. And I say, in government, it's my job. With my deputy ministers in the Office of the Chief Information Officer to protect the privacy of British Columbians. Let me give you a snapshot of what it looks like in government. Every single day, we get about 40 million intrusion attempts with varying degrees of sophistication, from the usual phishing attempts, the spam, to all the way to state-sponsored intrusion attempts. And I can't go into that much further, but we liaise with all different levels of government in Canada and our security establishment to weed that out. Every single day. The public then, as such, must invest considerable resources in their government to protect them from all those nefarious characters that are out there trying to gain access to your information from government networks. This act is only augmented and accentuated day after day in all those companies that you represent. So if you add up the total number of intrusion attempts in this room alone per day, and those attempts that you collectively stand on guard for, you're probably in the billions per day. If you have an internet connection, you are fragile. If you have a cell phone, you are fragile. We leave digital crumbs. And I go back on my policing career, you leave a scene, you leave DNA or skin or a flake or anything. But as we move around this world, we leave digital crumbs in everything that we do. And there are individuals who are intent upon gathering up those digital crumbs and nefarious activities and gather them up for whether that is for mischief purposes, for espionage or treason, or for motive of profit. So that is my one small responsibility in government, along with other responsibilities to protect British Columbia in that respect. And we're not immune from it. I could share with this room, we had a year ago 2 corrupted emails that 2 employees opened. From those 2 emails, we had to shut down the entire email system of government for 4 hours. And if you look at the productivity time, we had to reformat 1,834 computers, a considerable cost to the public because of the fact those 2 emails were inadvertently opened and the virus spread at such a rate. The integrity of the information of British Columbians was protected because it just shut down our email system, but it shows the extent at which individuals will go to attempt to get into our networks. I read the bio of many of your speakers tomorrow on some of their subjects, and they noted the notable hacks of the year, the notable events that have occurred, in the last several years, from the Target to the Home Depot to the different insurance companies. I noticed there was a small line about the government's loss of some hard drives and some records as well. It happens to us too. 8 years ago, somebody misplaced a hard drive in a storage room and forgot how they destroyed it. So we too are vulnerable as you are, and must be more vigilant. The recent activities of groups such as Anonymous have accentuated this space. So I believe a few years ago, you were all anonymous in the work that you did. The general public did not know what you did for your companies, for those who work for public organizations. But when you see the activities of, some would say, philanthropic hackers, or some would say otherwise, that are exposing things on the internet, I think there's a real public awareness of the work that all of you collectively do and speak on and are experts on in the public eye now. And I think that's only going to be accentuated as the number of users of technology, the Internet of Things, is just only going to increase. The need for security is only going to change. So let me comment very quickly on what Jeff mentioned about some of the announcements we made. We are very bullish on technology in this province. Technology is symbiotic with our natural resources background in this province, but we announced a couple of things in response to you, and many of you work in this sector. Many of you are entrepreneurs or will become entrepreneurs or have been entrepreneurs. We listened to the sector. The sector said, we need to help with market access. We want you to make sure talent of individuals matches what industry needs. And we need what government levers can be employed in the area of venture capital. So we made a number of announcements. We announced a $100 million venture capital fund. That has a potential of having a 4, 5, 6x multiplier. So we believe we're able to employ a government lever that puts $500 million of venture capital into the market space, which will accentuate the companies that we have here. Some of them, is Fortinet here? Anybody from Fortinet here? A local company that's working in a global space that can accentuate those companies that nurture and grow from here. We announced that coding will become available to every student between kindergarten and grade 12. So 600,000 students in British Columbia by the time they finish grade 9. We also announced that a quarter of our advanced education budget, we spend about $6 billion in education a year. $2 billion is in our universities, and I happen to be the university minister before this. A quarter of that budget is fenced. We found we trained far too many of the wrong individuals, and they were good individuals, but in occupations that we didn't have a job for. But a quarter of that budget is fenced for high demand occupations. So when the British Columbia Technology Industry Association, other in the tech space, say we need X number of people with X number of skills, and other occupations as well, we'll come and we'll do a demographic analysis. How many people are retiring? How many are we hiring? How much, where's the growth? We want to hire the right number of individuals for the career in British Columbia. I think we have space for one lawyer. Any lawyers in the room? But ladies and gentlemen, that's what our government's looking at, is a very scientific, data-driven model of what we need, where we need it, when we need it, what skill set we do need it. We invest the capital wisely. This is money from the bank. This is not borrowed from your children's future. This is money that we were able to squirrel away to invest for the right reason. So that's what we're doing in British Columbia. I look forward to the activities in the next several days. I know there's a security conference next week as well that some of you are at. But your work does not go unnoticed. You're the unsung heroes sometimes. It's the fact that people don't get into your company's systems as a measure of success, and you don't get any accolades for the plane that lands. We only hear about the plane that doesn't land. So you're the people that make sure that the plane lands, and the fact that there's no news means you've done a good job. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for what you do, and I look forward to the results of all the discussion you're going to have and the different speakers who come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Okay, just two quick things. You know, first of all, if you're in this room and you're not signed up for BC Aware Day tomorrow, come and see myself or somebody else from ISACA and we'll bust you in. So we want our leaders to be there tomorrow. We'll find room for you. The second thing is, I forgot to mention that we commissioned a study, we ISACA Vancouver commissioned a study to look at, you know, what is the state of affairs in our higher ed institutions in terms of, you know, are we preparing students to code securely? And the premise was we didn't think that we were doing enough. And so we actually released today, on the first day of the campaign, the results of that study. You can go to the BC Aware website, you can download the paper that we commissioned Carmel InfoRisk Consulting to do for us. And actually Ed Pereira from Carmel InfoRisk is here with us today. So I encourage you to go and download the results of the ISACA Vancouver Readiness Study from the BC Aware website. And without further ado, I want to introduce to you Frank Schettini, sorry, Frank. Anyways, Frank is the CIO for ISACA International, and he's going to moderate our panel discussion. And so come on up, Frank, and come on up, our panelists.
So while they get situated, I'll tell you a quick story. It was interesting listening to your comments about the threats and the amount of penetration that we have. I was fortunate enough in October to go to the Gartner IT Expo, where I get to meet with a lot of my co-CIOs to talk about what their challenges are. And I was in a panel discussion talking about cybersecurity. And one of my panelists happened to work for the US government. And he worked within the Department of Defense, but a subset of the Department of Defense. So I said, you know, just out of curiosity, how many attacks do you guys get? He says 1.2 billion. I said 1.2 billion a year? He goes, no, a day. So here's the amazing part about this. To get to their site, you had to have already penetrated the Department of Defense site. So it's actually a sub-site. So you can imagine the kind of problem that we have today, and that's obviously the US government. For some reason, people want to attack the US government. I don't get it being an American. I don't really get that part. But, I do want to thank you for inviting me, Justin, especially given the fact that we had 2 feet of snow yesterday, and I was able to make it, so I'm real excited. I'm not going back, by the way. I'm staying here, just so you know. I just saw the weather, the lights, and everything, so it's great. Before I kick it off, and I think we want to introduce the panelists. I was going to do it, but I think it's better to hear from themselves. I'm very excited about this panel. I've had the privilege of facilitating other panels. This one is unique, and I'll explain to you a little bit about that once we get started. So, go ahead.
Hi.
Let's pass it.
Hi, I'm Pam Snively. I am the Chief Data and Trust Officer for TELUS.
That's probably good.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Attridge. I oversee BC Hydro's cybersecurity program.
My name is Elisabeth Zornes. I'm coming to you from the San Francisco Bay Area. I work for Cisco, and I lead business strategy and operations for our cybersecurity business.
My name is Oliver Gruter-Andrews. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Provincial Health Services Authority Vancouver Coastal Health and Providence Healthcare.
And I'm Erwin Martinez, and I've been a CIO for quite some time. Just completed being the CIO at Coast Capital Savings Credit Union, and I'll be moving on to another CIO role that I can't talk about right now.
Keeps it very secure.
Oh, come on, we'll keep it a secret. It's okay. We won't tell anybody. Is anybody going to tell anybody? No, see, look at this audience. They're not going to do anything. By the way, we do want this to be interactive if possible. So if you have questions or comments with something that one of our panelists says, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll try to call you. So again, we can try to make this interactive. The one thing I mentioned, the thing I love about this panel, when you put panels together, a lot of times you blend the same kinds of people with the same kinds of job responsibilities. And on this panel, we have 2 CIOs, we have a CISO, we have a vendor, and we have a privacy person. So I think it's a great mix. I think this should really enrich the conversation to give us much more of a well-rounded thing instead of just straight a CIO perspective or a CISO perspective. So I'm really looking forward to the dialogue going forward. So to kick it off, PwC put out a study, I think about a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to get your guys' comments on this. They said that they predict that companies will, on average, face 38% more attacks this year than last year. What do you guys think about that? What are you guys seeing in your current companies? What are the challenges you're seeing in terms of threats globally? Are they diminishing? Are they increasing? And what can you share? Who wants to go first? Go ahead.
I'm not going to be the person to make the first comment on the first question, am I?
No, when we formed this panel, I just had this sneaky suspicion it might just possibly be Elisabeth.
Thanks for that. Obviously, in the role as a cybersecurity provider, both the infrastructure as well as the managed services to go with it, we see a lot of threats and attacks coming through, as well as work with our customers significantly on blocking those. So just to give you a sense for that, we are blocking 2.5 million threats or attacks a second. So that is more than searches on Google. And we have a threat research team of more than 260 people that do nothing but reading those threats and analyzing them and identifying where they come from, what the nature is, and as well trying to stop some of those, in fact. So we keep tabs on how where the threats come from as well as the volume, and we definitely see the volume increase. And the other piece, which is very interesting, is we see the sophistication of those threats grow exponentially. So this is no longer your, a teenager in a hoodie in the garage. This is sophisticated cybercrime with talented and very trained individuals, building up an industry which by now is half the size of the full IT industry.
Thank you. Somebody else want to comment on that? Jim?
Yeah, thank you. I'd agree with Elisabeth on the sophistication aspect, and I think that's something really important to explore in your own companies as your teams are giving you metrics around increases in amount of attacks, 38% increase in attacks. Well, not all attacks are created equal, and a vast number of the attacks that are actually coming to your organizations are kind of trivial, and they kind of bounce off of your everyday kind of hygienic defenses, as my colleague from the CISO, Gary, would say. I think you need to focus more on the material attacks and the types of impacts that they're having. And like Elisabeth was saying, not only are the sheer number increasing, but we're seeing the sophistication of the threat actors increase year after year. You might have heard in the news over the Christmas break about a power outage in the Ukraine that happened on December 23rd. It was acknowledged by the Ukraine government as what's understood as the first known power outage that was a result of a cyber attack. So the details are still coming out about that. That looks like a very sophisticated and probably a nation state type of attack against Ukraine, probably politically motivated. And it looks like there were at least 3 components to that attack, and probably a lot of money spent by the attackers. So it isn't just the sheer number. It's understanding who your adversaries are and who your threats are, and making sure that you're keeping up with the level of sophistication.
Oliver?
We're primarily worried about phishing attacks, social engineering attacks. I mean, the kind of brute force attacks that we're talking about here definitely affect us as well in public health. But we have to really ramp up the education of our employees, what they need to look for. And it starts from the CEO down to the CFO. It works its way all the way down. Just over the last couple of years, we've been able to see the sophistication increase. And I agree completely with that. That's really the worrisome piece. When it used to be, a badly worded email with 6 words in broken English supposed to be from the CEO to the CFO. It's now 7, 8, 9 lines. They know the nickname of the CFO. They have context to the organization. They quote details of operations within the email that are correct to the operation, which also makes you wonder where they get that from. So the sophistication level of those are very worrying, and as such we become more vulnerable in that. Education is the key here, to constantly reinforce what to look out for in emails and when to see a suspicious email and what to do when you get one.
So at this point, let me ask the audience, what do you guys think? Are you seeing more attacks, and is the sophistication level increasing as well? Or is this something that's new and novel to you at this stage of the game? Just nod heads, yes? No? Awake? No? Yeah, so I think it's really a relevant thing. So it's interesting. So we talk about the threats, and we can probably play scare tactics all we want, and we could probably do that for an hour. But what we really want to do is get into potential solutions. So I'm curious from my panel members, okay, so we know we have a threat. We know the threat's getting larger. It's getting more sophisticated. So how is that affecting our security profile? What are we investing in? What are we doing differently this year from last year? What should we be doing this year versus last year? Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, I would say to state the obvious, the cyber criminals have created a very dynamic environment where the threats change all the time. And so you have to have the traditional programs in place, and some people poo-poo the traditional programs, but you have to have anti-spam and antivirus and firewalls configured, and application firewalls and training and all that stuff. That's a given. But then you also need to look at the things that are leading some of the interesting technologies that are coming out with sandboxing or pseudo networks, and I think you have to try to really stay ahead of. It's kind of impossible to stay ahead of the criminals, but you have to try. And I think there's some really innovative things happening out there. So it becomes a bit of an and. Look at the innovations that are happening in the cybersecurity prevention and detection world, and at the same time keep that traditional focus going, because that's also going to help you as well.
I was just going to say to Oliver's point about the phishing, that still is such a source of even some of the major breaches. It might be the first route in. That education and awareness is as important as ever, or if not more important. And certainly our organization is more focused on education and awareness among our employee base than it has been in the past, just to prevent that type of issue.
Okay. Yes. So it's interesting, because when you look at what's going on out there in terms of investment, and you look at some of the challenges that have happened, the target scenario was brought up earlier and everything, and you look at things like bring your own device and IoT, traditionally security has always been an afterthought. Being an ex-development manager myself, the last thing I wanted to deal with was security requirements after I'd built the application, right? It took me that long just to get there. How is the focus on cybersecurity these days changing your product development processes in terms of your organizations today? Is it embedded in what you do from a product development perspective right up front, or is it still an afterthought in your organizations?
I can tackle that one. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I've got the mic. Definitely, we're hearing the terms security by design and privacy by design bandied about far more than they used to be within TELUS. Right from our CEO's mouth, he is saying that he absolutely wants that to be part of the culture, and we are seeing now finally some changes in how we're developing products, and even at the very conceptual stage, getting that type of thinking involved. I mean, it's still really, really challenging because there are lots of people that go pretty far down the path before they think of it. Again, for us, education and awareness around how to do those types of activities and how to engage security and how to engage privacy earlier on in the process, and make sure that they're aware of what the activities are in the organization is really important. But certainly that's a huge area of focus for us, every product.
Anybody else want to comment on security by design?
Thank you. I went to the Internet of Things conference in Chicago a little over a year ago, and I think this kind of summed it all up. I saw a great presentation. It was very slick and lots of great animation and very sexy. And it was a big venue, lots of people there, and it was the CTO of a major international firm that I won't name. And he gave a great presentation and lots of verticals and different things and views, and then at the end he said, oh yeah, and of course it all has to be secure, and he pressed his button and a red diagonal security came across his last slide, and I thought, yeah, that about sums it up. It's been a traditional problem within the industry of IT, and everything that I see within the Internet of Things, we're continuing along that front, especially in the race to market to get things out. It gives me hope, though, and I'm not just saying this because Elisabeth's sitting beside me, but I see a great amount of leadership from companies like Cisco that are actually helping build foundational level security into that infrastructure. But I'd say the biggest thing that organizations can do with all their projects, the biggest thing that I see, the biggest difference maker that I see in terms of getting security embedded in the project, whether it's an IT project or just some other type of business system, or even a facility with smart boiler rooms or what have you, is make sure security gets incorporated into the business requirements. That's such an important step, and it often gets overlooked because the business owners will just assume that security will get delivered. They just expect that. But at the end of the day, when budgets are tight and timelines are tight and project managers are driving to the requirements, having that simple statement in your fundamental business requirements, I find, makes the biggest difference. I can speak from a first-hand perspective on our smart grid, which I can stand up for as being probably one of the most robust in North America, if not in the world. And I think it's as a result of the leadership team at BC Hydro doing that and actually making it a very serious requirement in what they were building.
I was just going to say that one of the key things when you're asking the business to make it a requirement to engage security is to make sure that your security team is set up and resourced to do that. Because often what I found with I was a consultant for 6 years before just joining TELUS recently, and what I found in the past is that a lot of security folks don't want to get involved until it's more real. So it's like, I don't have time to look at that right now. That's not, that might never even happen. I need to look at things that are right in front of me and are happening right now. The 6 billion threats coming in every day. So making sure that you're resourced and that your team knows that that's important for them too, because it's not just about making sure the business pulls in security.
Let me add one layer to that, agreeing to what both of you have said. I am in the fortunate situation that I get to see a lot of customers as they visit us at our customer experience center in San Jose, as well as on a global basis. We saw the conversation about that really elevate from the technical level to the boardroom level. In the more recent future, we actually saw that shift over the last couple of months. And then oftentimes we see on the boardroom level that the CXO would say, I have a new business model, an Internet of Things, Internet of Everything that I would like to do, but I will not move forward unless I know I can do it securely. So we have really seen that shift that they say, am I really ready to deliver that? Because I know if I put investment in a new business model out there that could be the future and I can't do it securely, it will backfire on the company and have significant negative impact.
Let me ask the question of the audience based on that. So how many of you, I guess, okay, so you're just recording me, you're not recording them raising their hands, right? So let's not do this. No, please don't do that for a second. So I'm really curious about this subject. How many of you feel that your organizations are mature enough to actually turn down business opportunities or to slow them down because of cybersecurity threats? Raise your hand. Or slow down a little bit. Yeah, you can't stop. Well, I mean, and the other part of this, right, is you have to be pragmatic, right? You have to be pragmatic about, you know, you have to look at your risk management, what's it worth and what's it not worth, and how much you really want to invest in it from a cybersecurity perspective as well, like every other dimension. But okay, so there's a couple hands. So obviously we have a long ways to go in terms of education. I think we'll get to that subject in a couple seconds as well. But I was just curious, since it was a good topic there, to see that. Okay. Anybody else want to comment on this?
I do want to add a comment, which is we've focused a fair bit on product security, and clearly that's very important. And I think we all have security, threat, and risk assessment processes and forms, etc. But I always liken security to the experience of going into the great outdoors in British Columbia and dealing with the weather. And it's all about layers, right? You got to have your long shirt, your short shirt, your overlay, your windbreaker, etc. And I think the same applies to security, which is why I think security architecture is increasingly becoming important across the entire enterprise. Because if you just try and secure one little fortress in your castle, then chances are somebody will find a hole through it. I think the real approach is the architecture with all the different layers at the application level, at the infrastructure level, at the user access level, and to coordinate those things together. And I see that becoming more and more prevalent in thinking, and the kind of security experts that I like to work with start from that approach and work back to the individual component security. So I hope that we see more of that in the skill sets we're going to develop.
I think it's a really good comment. Does anybody want to say anything about that? Because I do think we're hitting that stage of, I'll call it pragmatic cybersecurity, because we've all hit that fear factor, and then we've heard the business saying we don't want to do anything, and now everybody's scared. Somewhere we have to reach that happy medium, and you're right, I think a security framework's a perfect way of addressing the level of relevancy. Anybody have any comments, or anybody have any examples in your organizations you want to share? No? Okay, that's cool. So let's talk about, so we talked a little bit about sophisticated attacks and everything. So can you share kind of what your security roadmap is for this year, the next coming years, on kind of what you guys are investing in and what changes you're making within your organizations to address cybersecurity?
Well, since I have the mic, I'll just throw one out there. So some of you may know that the Lower Mainland health authorities from Boundary East, including Provincial Health Services, are investing in a single electronic health record system. And that's important to all of us, because if any of us or family ever went to hospital or a health authority operated clinic, that's where the information gets captured. And there is an effort being made over the next few years to consolidate a number of standalone systems into a single vendor-provided system. And a big focus around that work is on privacy and security, because there's a realization that a series of independent standalone systems that you then try and integrate with each other with messaging exchange of various ways, etc., is really not the way to go. And I'm personally pleased. I've only been in this role for about 5 months. Previously, I was at UBC for a number of years. And so I came into this with the project pretty much underway, design work underway, and I was very pleased to see how much emphasis there was in the thinking around security, driven from the privacy angle, but it immediately translates into information security. And it's practical thinking. It's thinking like, not everybody gets an X-ray taken in a hospital. Some people go to a private clinic that their GP sends them to. The private clinic gets them a CD at the end of the day to carry around with them and put into a drive in the hospital. What could possibly go wrong? Well, a lot of things could go wrong. And so how do we secure that path? That's actually being thought through by the people designing the solution, not just the system itself, but all the different workflow steps that lead into the system use and out of it. And I think that's going to be a push for security in the health sector anyways in the coming years.
Cool, thank you. Erwin, I think you were.
A lot of hands.
You know, we recently at Coast presented a holistic plan, and Michael Young really put it together, the security officer there. Where there are a number of things in there, but it's a question of understanding holistically where your program is right now, where all of our programs are in different places, and where the holes might be. For us, we're doing a lot more on employee training. We're doing a lot more on data loss prevention. But one of the things that I would say is more of a theme that might something that we could all share is we're doing a lot more on the recovery part of it, because the chances of any of us getting hacked or having to deal with an incident is extremely high. And so we're focusing a lot on the post-event activities, including testing, including actually walking through scenarios of fake attacks and the whole scripted incident response. It's a little maybe pessimistic, if you will, but if you look at it from the viewpoint of, we're pretty much sure the average organization our size is going to get attacked this year. We better be sure that we know exactly how we're going to follow up.
So to that point, how many of you currently actually have response team simulation events where something actually happens and you go through the processes to make sure, kind of like a disaster recovery plan in the old days? A couple? Some of you? Yes, that's good, yeah. Because you're right, it's amazing what you can learn from that process. And who's not communicating to who that you thought was going to communicate to who, and who's supposed to do what that wasn't really doing what. So it's interesting. Let me switch over. It's funny because we've been talking about cybersecurity, but a lot, and we're going to continue. But the world of privacy is changing a lot too. In the U.S., the whole safe harbor provisions that the European Union changed and everything. The privacy world is almost as topsy-turvy as cybersecurity is right now. So I'm really excited to have Pam on the panel. Maybe she can share a little bit about a couple things. One, how is cybersecurity impacting you in your privacy role, and what are some of the privacy things that we need to worry about as cybersecurity professionals as well?
So the cybersecurity, the increase in cybersecurity events has had a corollary effect on privacy for a few different reasons. One is every time there is a big breach and it hits the press and everyone talks about why people are vulnerable and what could happen with their data and identity theft. What it means for us is, first of all, way more sensitivity around cybersecurity, around privacy breaches within our own organization, as well as just generally more sensitivity from all of our customers, consumers, all Canadians, with respect to how their data is being used, who has it, what it's being collected for. So over the years, we're seeing a constant increase in sensitivity around data. So events that a few years ago would have been a non-event, I always say I was working in a financial processing company a while back, and where we used to, 10, 15 years ago, when we got somebody else's bank statement in the mail, we would just say, oh, I got somebody else's bank statement in the mail, and we'd either throw it out or we'd give it back to the postal carrier. Now, people are picking up the phone and saying, hey, I want you to, this is a privacy breach and I want you to pay off my mortgage for me. So very, very different world, and every single time we get a big breach, we see these increases. But the flip side is also true on the privacy side, which is breach readiness. I've stopped calling it breach response over the last sort of several years in my consulting practice, and I am that one lawyer. So I did a tremendous amount of...
Wait, you didn't tell me that. Why do we have a lawyer on the panel, Justin?
It's my previous life. But we were handling... Never fails, always popular. We were handling a lot of the large...
Almost as popular as IT, right?
Yeah. A lot of the large breaches, and most of the ones probably that you've read about in the paper were actually handled by my team in our practice within Canada anyway, the Canadian end of them. And what we're seeing is we stopped calling it breach response. We started calling it breach readiness, partly out of this, I don't know if it's pessimism or just really an obligation to be ready for these events. but a huge increase in the focus from the regulators, privacy regulators, on how you respond to a breach. They recognize now that bad things can happen to good companies, that it doesn't necessarily mean that you were, terrible and didn't take privacy seriously or didn't take security seriously. They've all had their own breaches now, which has been quite a blessing, actually. But what they're looking at is how do you actually respond when it happens, and can you manage it? And so, for example, the Target breach, that was exactly the issue for them. The breach itself wasn't anywhere near as detrimental as their response mechanisms. So, huge increase in our focus on breach readiness, and you put your finger on it. Where in the last several years, where we've seen the biggest mistakes happen are where people don't know who is talking to whom in the organization, who's supposed to make a decision. Everything takes forever, even just little things like, okay, what's going to be in the notification letter to the affected individuals? You have internal fighting over who's supposed to write it, who has approval rights over it, whether it should be external counsel, internal counsel, etc. So with countless clients, again, this is before I came to TELUS, countless clients, that was the churn that went on, and those decisions could have easily been made in advance about exactly who gets to do what and who has to do what during a breach.
Cool. So let me paint, somebody else want to comment? So let me paint you a scenario. You're in your company, you have the ultimate security policies, you have the superstar team, you do incident response team simulations all the time, everything's perfect, and then you decide to outsource something. How many of you impose the same set of rules and policies on your third-party vendors as you do on yourselves? Anybody want to comment on that?
Came to us.
Or let me ask the audience, how many of you have the same rules for your third-party vendors? Because that's really good. We actually do. I unfortunately had to reject the vendor who had the ultimate perfect solution for a problem that we've been trying to solve for years, that I was happy to buy off the shelf and do it, and I had to reject them because of their security gaps. It's the very, very frustrating thing, because we've been looking for a long time for something like this. And we said, go back to the drawing board, and when you have security figured out, let me know so we can audit you, and then we may move forward. But
yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. If by outsourcing you mean, have an application service hosted, software as a service, rather than in-house, definitely the same PIA, SDRA processes, all of that stuff applies. And the products constantly have to reassess themselves as they go through upgrades. I would say that is very similar. But you used the word outsourcing, and I think there is still another step if you actually outsource part of your operation, if it involves people transfer and those kind of things. I think that's increasingly become both a cost driver in outsourcing, but also benefits driver. I used to do outsourcing as a business activity, and in those days security wasn't sort of the big topic still. It was sort of last decade, middle of last decade. I think nowadays oftentimes outsourcing actually happens. One reason being that you are not sure about your own security enforcement ability, and somebody comes along and says that they can do better than you can, and you buy that. That's often now a driver for that as well.
okay.
I think one interesting aspect of this is that generally organizations have very weak vendor management programs, and this is really an aspect of vendor management. And what you often find is something that may have a label of vendor management, and you open it up and it's kind of procurement. And this has to do with managing the full life cycle of the vendors, including what we're talking about now in selection, making sure, but also in monitoring them throughout to make sure that they are doing the kind of upkeep that they need to do on their programs. I also find that what we often all lean on, the SSA 16 and the old SAS 70 standard is okay. It's good, but it really falls short in a lot of areas, and security and disaster recovery is one. It's a very weak check. So I think it's a call for us to have much better and more robust vendor management programs that include information security as well as other things.
So again, in my life prior to TELUS, I worked for one of Canada's largest business process outsourcers for 10 years. And so I was on the receiving end of either due diligence or contracting from people who secured our services as their outsourcer. And I can say that, there were two patterns that I saw. Well, three maybe. One was some organizations just didn't pay any attention whatsoever. But there were organizations that were very, very, very careful about what they put in their contracts. But they didn't do any due diligence in advance of the contract. So they really didn't know if we were in a position to comply with anything that we said. And there are lots of vendors out there that will just say, check, 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 check on any box you say and agree to any terms because they don't think it's ever going to materialize. Or they've got some really great liability clauses. And then the flip side was the organizations that came in that did incredibly good due diligence and really, really, kicked every tire, checked every single thing out, and then put like a little, you'll maintain reasonable physical, administrative, and technical controls, and that was it. So you could change everything you were doing the next day, and they would have absolutely no recourse. So I always say, if it's important enough to you to do the due diligence on it, make sure it's in the contract. If it mattered to you ever, it's gonna matter to you the next day, and make sure the contract covers you for the next day.
Okay. So, changing gears a little bit for a second here. So, I'm excited that we have such a large audience. So obviously everybody in this audience gets the importance of cybersecurity. Can we say that about our boards and our other C-suite members? Do they get it? How do we communicate with them? What do we say to them? How do we, besides reading the newspaper of the latest attack, how do we get them from a business perspective to understand the importance of it? Or do they already understand it?
I'm sure everybody has a say on this one. They do, I find. I interacted with the boards at UBC, at Vancouver Coastal Health, and PHSA in recent years on this topic, and they do, because it is now a much bigger issue. It's much more in the media, like the Ukraine event and those kind of things you read about. I think we almost have sort of the opposite challenge at the moment, that the boards tend to be a bit running scared about this topic, and they're not necessarily qualified to understand what the right measures, the reasonable measures are. And you can find yourself in a situation where the education kind of goes in the other direction now, and it's to say, well, yes, but we are not a nuclear power station in Ukraine. So we do need to take precautions, we need to have security in place. It has to be appropriate to our operation, our risk levels, the kind of threats that we're dealing with. And so there's a tempering of the conversation going on. It's a very good conversation. Much rather have that conversation than a conversation 10 years ago when it was on security. Well, just change the locks, right? And this is a much better conversation to have now, but it is a different kind of conversation.
Yeah, as mentioned before, we are seeing, a shift in the level of stakeholders we are interacting with, and our customers much more to the board as well. And there's a significant awareness that security is a key business differentiator. So it has become it turned from a necessity to a business differentiator. And many companies are thinking about it that way. Now the question is, how do you execute on that? And there is, oftentimes the answer is like, are we secure yet? What do I need to do to be secure? And there is no simple answer to that, obviously, as all of you in the room are fully aware of that. So I think there is part of our next chapter that we're going to jointly write together as an industry. You need to say, based on what you said as well, how do I turn from parts of the answer of feature functionality, capability, process fragments, to more of a comprehensive answer that allows you to architecturally say, we at least now know how to approach it. There is a comprehensive architecture we can turn to, and then we can graduate on where we need to go on that spectrum. How secure do I need to be? How far do I need to go? And that's, I think, the next chapter all of us have to write together.
I totally agree with Oliver and Elisabeth. I think the board is getting more and more involved in IT security. I think you'll find a lot of board members are actually being courted by security companies, taken out to dinners and brought to conferences and shown really scary presentations. We've seen that, and they're very aware of what's going on in terms of the potential business impacts. But I think in terms of successful interactions with the board, I think you have to take what is largely a lot of different technical moving parts and turn it into a discussion about risk. The board members above anything else will certainly understand a discussion about risk, and if you can normalize it and explain it to them in their language, I find that's your best approach. If you're trying to get into any type of technical language, that you're going to lose them almost instantly. But if you're talking to them about what's the potential business impact to them, what's the loss of reputational value, what's the financial risk, those are things they understand. And if you have some statistics to back up those types of risks, you will get their attention and their support. That's been my experience.
I think Erwin wants to say something.
So I've been a CIO for a long time, and one of the things I've noticed is there's a dramatic increase in the awareness of the board members have of cybersecurity. And we had board members at Coast go to the Institute of Corporate Directors training, where they just basically had an information security cybercrime presentation, and they just came back frightened, that, oh, holy cow, we've got to follow up. And then it becomes incumbent upon us, all of us, to really get ahead of that and be proactive. And one of the challenges with, and I like the context of risk is very important, but one of the challenges we need to step up to is the fact that information security is a complex, multidimensional topic. And some of our board members can easily get distracted. They can sit down and say, talk to me about firewalls. And you say, well, okay, I can do that. But really, it's a much larger topic. And the challenge we need to step up to is actually to present that holistic viewpoint of what information security is, so that the board can understand. And very recently at Coast, we did that, and it seemed to go well, but it took a lot of time and effort. But it's very much worth the exercise, because the board members want to understand this now, so now it's incumbent upon us to help them understand it.
It's interesting. I wasn't going to mention this before, but it's kind of apropos at this stage of the game. ISACA and the National Association of Corporate Directors are actually working together towards a joint certification for board directors, which they actually identified the need, not us, to address these specific topics, because we're finding that some boards are either digging too deep or they're asking questions at way too high a level, and you can't help in either case. So the question is, what is it they really need to know, and what are the real decisions that they really need to address, and what are the risks that, what are the questions they should be asking the CEO and the C-suite? And as opposed to your point, they just read an article in the Ukraine, and so how's that affect us? We all get those emails all the time, right? saw something, are we okay? Well, I don't know how you answer that question, but so that's something that we're looking at. So let me go to another subject, which is very relevant to all of us, and that is skill shortage. I'm sure you've seen published studies recently. Actually, I think RSA and ISACA have a joint study coming out at the RSA conference, which will show that we're looking at a skill shortage of multiple millions of people. I can't give you specific numbers for obvious reasons, but you get the gist of it. What are we doing as CIOs to train our people, to bring them up to speed, to get the proper skills in place? Do we have the skills in your organizations at this stage of the game? Or do you feel, or are those things that you guys are worrying about, do you stay up at night thinking about those things?
Well, since I have the mic again.
Yeah, this is all about you, Oliver. I wanted to make sure you understood that this is...
This is what I'm very passionate about, so you hit on the right one here. I'm a firm believer in developing my own people, my own staff, in the first instance, and I'm generally a believer in that, but in security in particular, because what you cannot buy as skill set is the nature of your own system environment, and that's where your vulnerabilities are. And so I believe in training specialists in your organization, looking for people who have an interest in growing into this rapidly advancing career space for IT professionals, and bringing the advantage of your own system knowledge, and then broadly investing in all your technology staff to raise their skill and awareness level about security. Yes, you will buy some skills in and supplement them, absolutely, but I think investing in your own staff is the most important thing.
As the mic happens to come my way, I'm happy to, add to that. So skills gap is obviously, a significant topic in security specifically. There is technology, there is architecture, and there are skills, and everything need to come together in order to impact security effectively. So our CEO, our own board in Cisco is very concerned about that as well, and we just announced 2 weeks ago a program where we are investing $10 million to get a program started for a specific security-driven education program. You might be familiar with our CCNA, CCIE program. We'll do the same for security specifically. And we're going to invest into the industry to help more people that are in roles today to add on security expertise, but as well to work directly with the universities to start to get them interested in the security topic and help them grow their careers specifically with security in mind.
Anybody else want to comment? No? Okay. So let me ask you this. We know there's a skills shortage. Can you guys highlight for the audience what some of those competencies are that you're looking for in terms of these individuals? Obviously, there's some technical skills, but are there other skills you're looking for so that, for those in the audience that are looking to beef up their team or to train them better, what are some of the skill sets that you guys are looking for? What are the competencies that you really think are going to make a difference in the future?
I think first and foremost is finding individuals that have a passion about your business. That might sound silly, but there's lots of people out there with great technical chops. There's lots of people out there, lots of cybersecurity professionals that are very technically adept, but I find the most effective ones are the ones that not only understand your business, but care about its success and can help put risks kind of in context with what the business is trying to do. That's a rare combination, and that's what I look for in my team. The technical chops and everything else is really important, but I find that's probably the most important attribute.
Anybody else want to comment? I think Erwin wants to comment.
This is an arena where there's not enough folks with lots of different skills, but I think there's a particular dearth of really good folks who can actually be the security officer, the security lead. That takes a lot of different skills. And also the people who can do architecture. We talked about architecting into solutions security, and I think that's another area where there just aren't enough people with the skills and talent to do that.
So I heard business, I heard architecture, I heard technical. Anything else you guys think of? Anybody in the audience have any particular skills that jump out at them? I actually, from my experience, it's actually finding individuals who are also very innovative, which kind of sounds counterintuitive when you think about it. But the person who's actually going to dig into the threat analysis has to be pretty innovative and figure out how things work. Has to be creative. You're right. I think the business is a really key point. I'm glad you mentioned that. But I think you really want people who are thinkers, not robots, when it comes to this. So having skills, and that's great, but being able to interpret that from a business perspective, providing some kind of a pragmatic side of it, and also understanding kind of how things play out really is also a critical skill set that we've seen lacking in a lot of places. Anybody, does that resonate with anyone, or yes, no? Yeah? Cool. So I know this is pretty much a C-suite kind of group of people, but I'm just curious if you guys have any recommendations in terms of if you're a young aspiring student or person that's early in their professional career and wants to make cybersecurity a career, what suggestions do you have for them? Run for the hills? Throw your hands up and say, oh, I have a great job, like the weather forecaster, right? The weather forecaster is the greatest job in the world because no matter what you do, even when they're wrong, you're like, well, yeah, my simulation model said this. So therefore, the fact it snowed 4 feet today and I only said 1 inch, well, that's not my fault. So is that what we're looking for?
You know, I can speak about myself. Maybe in terms of my career, I've been in IT for many years. I don't dare to say how many. You can do the math. But I purposefully went into cybersecurity not too long ago because it's the only part of IT where you have an active adversary who drives innovation on a day-to-day basis. So unlike IT, which churns like every 5 to 7 years, we have a much faster pace in cybersecurity. And I personally find that very invigorating. So this is for people that like a fast pace, like innovation, like to, you know, be on top of things, as well as deal with many unexpected areas in the business. So that is, I think, you know, as you look for people that, or people that come up in their careers, that would be part of that profile.
Yeah, good.
I would say probably one of the most compelling things that I would give to, and I do give to young people that are looking for a career in cybersecurity, is to learn how to hack into things. It's a really important skill set, and I mean legally, of course, legally and ethically hack into things.
Is that your new startup, by the way? Is that
the whole field of cybersecurity is predicated on understanding how to protect business systems and applying policies and controls and processes around that. And I find a lot of professionals get a long ways in their career, but kind of fall short in terms of being able to really understand how to secure systems and how to secure a business. And part of that is because they don't really understand how the attacker's mindset works. They've never broken into anything. I started my IT career as somebody who was doing ethical hacking in the financial system, and it was a very eye-opening experience to learn how to get into databases, to learn how to get into encrypted systems, to learn how to break these systems, learn how to break into web servers and make them do your bidding for you. I think when you understand that, it not only gives you some great technical chops, but it also opens your eyes firsthand to how to deal with the threat and start putting forward effective controls and mitigating it.
As far as the field is concerned, I probably wouldn't suggest work for a healthcare provider or a financial institution. I would say find a genome bank or work for a nanotech company, because I think that's where the cyber attacks of the future are going to be. That's where a lot of the attention by cyber criminals is going to be, and that's where the greatest need internally to secure yourself will be, and probably the best investments.
So on that note, I think we probably want to wrap up and say, I want to give a round of applause to our 5 panelists here who've come, taking time. They've taken time away from their busy schedules to come and talk about this subject. Obviously, cybersecurity is an ongoing dialogue. It's not going to stop anytime soon. It's going to consistently evolve. We're never actually going to solve cybersecurity. Which is the other important message that we want to get across to everyone, but it's a great opportunity. I think Elisabeth has I think, the perfect view of it, which is it's a challenge and it's an opportunity. People see it as a threat and a bad thing. You know, sometimes these things can turn into a positive thing. So I see it as a real opportunity for us to really do a great job in our organizations and really help our C-suite and our board level members really have the comfort that we have the right business model and that we're going to make our organization successful in the future. So with that, I thank you all very much for taking the time to meet with us today and look forward to the rest of the BC Aware session starting tomorrow. We'll be here all day tomorrow and for the other 14 events after tomorrow, right? So